Alright, now we have the pivot table section. This is one of the more interesting applications in Excel, but it's actually incredibly useful, as it can quickly and easily summarize lots of data. Pivot tables may seem funky at first, but they're absolutely essential to mastering Excel because of how good they are at aggregating a lot of data, and like I wrote here, quickly and easily summarizing lots of data. One hint for this is that if you ever feel in your mind that you need to group by, then pivot table is what you need to use. So if you ever say, oh, I would like to see total account balances by state, that's how you know you need to use a pivot table. And of course, that is the first thing we're going to do right here. It says, let's make a pivot table showing average account balance by location. So I'm going to go down here and I'm just going to delete this one we already have. First, start by clicking somewhere in the data and insert pivot table. So you can do that. You can go up here and you could say insert after clicking on the data right here. And pivot table, this nice button right here. I prefer to go Alt, and you can see the letters pop up on the headers. N, V, and that'll do the same thing. I don't know why I have the T in here. That's probably an older version. I'm going to go ahead and delete that T. Anyway, this Create Pivot Table dialog box shows up. And you can see that since we had it clicked on the data, it already selected the table. And that's this data right here. And then from there, all you really need to do is pick where you want to do it. If you want to put it on a new worksheet, it defaults to new worksheet. But we're going to go ahead and put it on an existing worksheet. And you can, I guess, technically type in the location of the worksheet and cell references right here, but it's much easier just to click this arrow. And you can place it wherever you'd like. I'm going to plop it right there. I'm not going to delete that previous one. I'll just make it right next to it. That looks like a good spot. There. Now it does not overlap with other pivot tables or other data. Yeah, apparently these take up a lot of space when they're first created. Now this is the part that just takes a lot of getting used to. You see we have all of the fields in our data up here. Employee ID, first name, etc. And then we have all of these, or I would say these 4 different places that we can drag and we can put our fields. I'm going to explain what these 4 different slots do, but honestly, it's just going to take a lot of practice to try and get used to this. Okay, the values are what you're going to be aggregating in the pivot table. So here it says sum of account balance. When you're summing up the account balances, that is what you're going to be putting in the values. The rows and columns are what you're going to be grouping by. So if we're grouping by the location or the state, then we are going to put that in either the rows or the columns. There's not much difference between the rows and the columns. That's just personal preference as to how you want the pivot table to look. Once again, that's something you can figure out once you start using pivot tables. And the filters is just something that you add at the top if you want to filter something out. Like let's say that I made this exact pivot table here and I wanted to filter out Arizona. I could filter it out with the filters right here. So let's go ahead and make this. I'm going to go ahead and put the location in the rows. And you see it's already starting to look almost exactly like this. We're halfway there at just the click of one button. And we're going to do it again for the account balance. Boom. Sum of account balance right there. And of course we can go ahead and we can change the format of that so it looks a little bit more like dollars. I should do that for this too. And yes, if you don't see this window right here, you can go up here and you can click on this field list right here. This field list is going to toggle whether this comes up. One more note is that if you don't want to see the sum, if you'd rather see a different aggregation, let's say you want to see the count of how many account balances you're seeing, you could go to here, click on what you have in the values, and say value field settings. And you can click on count if you'd rather have a count of how many account balances, the average account balances, maximum, minimum, product, which I don't think I've ever used, but it's there, and there's a lot of other nice mathematical things. But the most common ones are sum and count and maybe average. I'm going to leave it on sum. Let's go down here. We have an even more complicated one right here. This has rows, columns. It says here we want to see the average account balance, but this time it's broken out by location and business unit, not just location. And we don't want to include anybody with over 10 funds. So let's go ahead and make that here. If I go up here, Alt and V, I'm going to scroll down, existing worksheet. I'm going to place it right there next to it. Enter, enter. And here we have that blank pivot table screen. All right, and now we want to aggregate the account balances. So the account balances go in the values. Starts out by just summing up all of the account balances. Not quite what we want because we want to group it by the location in the business unit. So location we'll put in the rows. There, now it is grouped by the rows. And then we want the business unit. We could put the business unit right here in the rows with it. And it can look like that, but I don't think that's quite as readable as going up here and doing this. And that way you can see for an Arizona, business unit 1, business unit 2, and the sum of the account balances in it. And we are close, but we're not quite there. I'm going to go ahead and, of course, make this into comma format. And you can see that our grand totals are a little bit high. And that's because we haven't yet filtered out everybody with over 10 funds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and grab business unit, and I'm going to throw it in filters also. Oh, can we not do that? Oh. Okay, I'm going to grab number of funds, and I'm going to put it in the filters. See, I'm learning something every day. Okay. And for the number of filters, we can do this little drop-down arrow, click select multiple items, and then we're going to go, and we're not going to select all of them because we don't want anything with more than 10. So we'll get rid of the one that says 14. And then that way we're only including 1, 2, 4, and 5. And there you go. That is our grouped account balances, our sum of the account balances over the state and the business unit, showing accounts that have no more than 10 funds. And you can see that this can be something that's really quick. You can quickly summarize data. Just go, insert pivot table, drag a couple things in there, boom, you have your answer. A couple more notes before we move on to the practice problems. If there are certain fields in the row labels or column labels that you didn't want to see, you can also filter them out with the drop-down arrows on the pivot table. So you could use these right here, and you could say, I don't want to see Arizona. Oh, look at that. And the same up here. You can filter out number 1. All right. The second note is that pivot tables do not auto-refresh, which means if you change the underlying data, you're going to have to right-click on one of your pivot tables and click refresh, and that will refresh the data. For example, if I come up here and I change this one to 999999999, that's not going to be reflected in here. I'm going to have to come down here and click refresh to do so. And you see now we've got that big California account in there. I'm going to go ahead and click Control Z to sort of get rid of that big disgusting number. And that's it for pivot tables. It's really more about practice and getting used to using pivot tables, and I'm not going to do as much talking about them, because once you get used to them, you see that they're not super complex and they can help you out greatly. So let's go on to practice problem number 1. Okay, practice problem number 1. Use a pivot table to show the average participant contribution in 2015, broken out by the following age groups: under 25, 25 to 45, 45 to 65, and over 65. The age here is calculated as of January 1st, 2016. And I wrote here as a note that you will need to add another column to the data before making a pivot table. So this is going to need to be a column, the age groups. Now you can go ahead and try this for yourself now, or you can wait a bit and I'll give you a quick hint on the age group column. Alright, best of luck. You can make an age group column here by dividing these ages into different buckets by using if statements, and for that matter, a bunch of nested if statements. As an example of what it would look like, you could just say if this here is less than 25, under 25, and then value of false, meaning it's not under 25, you just put another if statement in there. Best of luck, and I'll show you how to do this in a minute. Alright, if I create an age group column right here, age group, I'm going to go ahead and color this blue because I like making my formulas blue. I'll just do that same formula. If this is less than 25, under 25, and then I'll just keep making nested if statements And now, since it's not under 25, maybe it's under 45. If so, 25 to 45. Keep doing it. Left arrow to just select the cell next to it. If this is less than 65, 45 to 65. Otherwise, you are over 65. Right, parentheses to finish them all off. And they say this is under 25, this person's over 65, 45 to 65, looks like it's working. So if I go ahead, I could do Alt NV, or I could also go up here and click Insert Pivot Table. It already selects the data, so we're gonna have to go Existing Worksheet. I'm just gonna put it right next to it, right here. What exactly am I looking for? Use a pivot table to show the average participant contribution in 2015 by the following age groups. Okay, 2015. There's the total contribution amount, but we don't want the sum, we want the average contribution amount. But then we want to go ahead and further break this out by age group and see if we can see a difference between the average age group contribution. So maybe people over 65 are contributing a little bit more than people who are under 25. Let's go ahead and look at the results. People under 25 are contributing the least. People over 65 look like they're contributing the most. And if you wanted to sort this by the highest to lowest or lowest to highest average contribution, you could go up here to Data, and if you click on here in the column that you want to sort, you can go ahead and click one of these sort buttons. I'm going to go lowest to highest. And you see here, under 25 is the lowest, and then it just goes right in numeric order, in a way just as we'd expect. Now let's go down here, see if we got the same answer. Oh, this is nice. Okay, this is another way to do it. I went ahead and I just used several if statements, and as you see, that'll work. We likely got the same answer. Passed me even formatted too, what a show off. But what I did was I went and I created a table that I could use to do a VLOOKUP on, and this is, I guess I was trying to show you that this is how you could do a VLOOKUP with a true approximate match, because what it'll do is it'll say, well, if it's not over 25, then we'll put it in here, and it'll return the under 25 group. If it's 30, it'll return this group right here. And so yeah, you see we did a VLOOKUP with a 1 here for a true, so that it'll go and it'll fit each one of these into its own category. And the alternate solution, that's what we did. And either way, whichever one you use, it'll produce the same table that we created up there. Alright, if you weren't able to get that, don't worry, because we've got a second practice problem, and you could hopefully refine your skills. Maybe you could tackle this next one. For practice problem number 2, use the check register on Piv Table PP2, practice problem 2 data tab, that's right here, to show a schedule of each participant's monthly pension benefit they were paid. And I put pension in all caps because I assume that we only want the things that are pension. We don't want the lump sum, or yeah, if there's the occasional lump sum payment in here, we only want the pensions. Make a pivot table where participants' payee numbers are row headers and the paid dates are the column header. And remember to filter out any lump sum payments. Oh, I gave some nice little hints right there. I may think that I don't even need to give hints for this. Alright, best of luck. Alright, just as usual, to start things off, we've got to go and we've got to click on the data, and then we've got to go Insert Pivot Table, and then we want to click Existing Worksheet. We've got to click this here so that it knows we were going and searching for where we are going to put it, and I'm going to put it right here. Hopefully that doesn't intersect with this right here. Alright, quickly do it again. Insert Pivot Table, Existing Worksheet, find a location. Okay, moral of the story, put this on its own tab when you're doing this in the future. I'm gonna try and do this on this practice problem right here. Yeah, so it was reaching down here even into the grouped rows. And it says for this that it wants the payee number in the rows and the paid dates on the column. Okay. So for this, we want the payee number in the rows. So we've got these, how many is this, 10? 10 payee numbers. And we want a date in the column. It's February 1st, March 1st. I assume it's just the first of each of these. Yeah. These are just the first for each one in 2015. I'm gonna go ahead and put filters on there so I can see. By the way, that's another really key thing to learn with Excel, is filters are gonna be your best friend. I know it as Alt-DFF. I'm sure there's probably another way to do it in one of these tabs up here. Look for it. Yeah, data, filter, and then if you go an Alt down arrow, it'll go and it'll show you everything that's in this column. And it says here, it's only got 2015 check dates. And just by looking at this, we can see that there are only first dates in here. So these are all the first of each of the months in 2015. This must be another update with Excel, where with dates in a pivot table header, they group them, which is actually quite interesting. So we have here all of our months, and we have here all of our payee numbers, and we want to see the monthly payment amount. So we go ahead and we put this in the values. We can see at what point they were all getting paid. Now this person, it's got a random big payment at the start of their payments, because I would bet that they got a lump sum of about $1,500 right here, and then they started getting $100 a month. So what we need to do is we need to go and we need to add a payment ID into the filters so that we can get rid of all of the lump sums and make it only pensions that are selected in this pivot table. Oh, and you see that already reduced a row. Okay, so we're down to 8. Oh, 8 people only got lump sums. Or I mean, only 8 people were getting pensions. And as you see, from January to December, this person was getting $70 a month. And that's another cool application of this. This is a little bit more rare in that you often don't need to see a schedule like this broken out. But if you want to, this is a pivot table, as you can see, is clearly a good way to do this. But the more common way to do it is like we did on practice problem number 1, is when you want to group by, you want to aggregate by a certain group. Times like this are going to be usually when you're using pivot tables. But as you can see, a pivot table is a very flexible tool where you can do a lot of cool different things. Anyway, that was the entire pivot table section. That's good because I wanted to keep it a lot shorter than that lengthy VLOOKUP session we did. Alright, we've got 1, maybe 2 more lectures where I teach you all the rest of these functions, and then we've got standards and tips. Alright, let's finish this off. I'll see you there.